Welcome to Wild. I'm your host, Robin Lavasser. They say our biggest fear is not that we are inadequate. It's being powerful beyond measure. In this podcast, I will share how to break through imaginary ceilings, lean into success, discovering your purpose, and understanding how to create the business and life of your dreams. From failures to triumphs and all the tactics in between, let's jump into the wild arena together. Welcome back to Wild with Robin Lavasser. I'm going to talk about a topic that I think sometimes I often avoid because it's not something that was talked about as I was growing up. I think for many of us, it can be a taboo word. It's not something that is discussed in general friendship conversations or family conversations. It often feels private, vulnerable, and whether it's that you have enough of it, that you don't have enough of it, that you spend too much of it, the lovely talk is about money. And one of the things that I am so grateful for is the financial literacy that came into my life when I was the most vulnerable, I would say. And so I'm going to take you a little bit through where this topic hits home for me for a minute. I will never forget being a little girl and growing up. I actually lived in a 4,000 square foot house on the hill. I had a balcony that overlooked the entire city in a small town in Southern Oregon. And I mean, you name it, I pretty much had it. My parents always had new cars. We had Easter dinner at the country club. I grew up with what you would call a very charmed life. Now, lucky for me, I also grew up with two incredible sisters, an incredible extended family, and two amazing parents. And I know that money wasn't necessarily a piece of that part of our family, meaning the love and all of those things. But what I will say is that I didn't know what it was like to not have it growing up until I did. When I was 14, going on 15, all of a sudden, and this is not an exaggeration, boxes started showing up in my house and nobody was saying a word. And what I didn't know was that my parents were entrepreneurs and they had made some poor financial decisions, engaged with some poor financial advisement, and overspent. There were a lot of dynamics that went into it, and then had a business that got swallowed up by big business coming into town. And all of a sudden we were moving from our 4,000 square foot house into an apartment on Main Street. Really no notice and no true conversation other than, yes, we're moving. And things were hard, but not real acknowledgement of anything. And I now can look back and see as an adult the pain and the avoidance that both my parents were in. And then you fast forward and things are caught, not taught. And when I met my husband, he and I had $200 legitimately to our name. He lived in a duplex. I lived in an apartment. We both owned our cars, which were beat down, 1980s cars, free and clear. And beyond that, we didn't have anything. And so we were living paycheck to paycheck. We were trying to build a life together. And the way that you generally get started in that, right, is through credit cards and, borrowing, if you will. And later on in life, I'll never forget the first time I heard it, I was a little bit offended. And they said, poor people pay interest and rich people earn it. And I was like, that is so rude. I'm paying a lot of interest. So put me in the poor people category and yet I would see myself as middle class, if you will, and doing overall well. My husband and I were making good money and raising the kids and all of these things. But the truth is we were borrowing by a mile than what we had in assets. Many of people have heard my story, but we embarrassingly had to end up short selling a house. And I'll never forget the moments of standing in the grocery store and knowing, nope, do not put that in the cart, right? We're on a budget, or checking the bank account right before we went inside to see if everything was going, or floating checks, right? Many of you are maybe too young if you're listening to actually know what floating a check was, but floating a check is literally, it would take a couple days for a check to cash. So you'd write it knowing that paycheck was coming in a few days later. It's technically illegal, I believe, to float checks. And yet I think the world is full of people that potentially float checks or are robbing Peter to pay Paul. We went to paycheck stores and cashed checks that you pay back with extreme interest, right? Do advance on your payroll. I remember taking a loan out. Our son made 10-year-old All-Stars. and we traveled all summer long. And pain of the cost of traveling in a family of six, our oldest at that point was off in the military in the Marines. So with Griffin and the triplets, we were literally charging on credit cards left and right to stay at each hotel and be out of town all weekend and eat, with the team over pizza or fast food, whatever was going on, and then buying the uniforms. And of course, our son needed the latest bat and helmet and glove and all of the things, gas money back and forth. And you think, in so many ways, especially after the evolution of our careers, oh, that seems like small things, but I'll never, ever, ever lose sight of how big those things felt and how daunting they felt because we didn't have enough of the tool to make them happen. And that while we were excited and enjoying every minute of travel with our kids, we were also whispering to each other, we can't afford to do that. Or how are we going to tell them no about this or that? How are we going to fundraise? And as our son kept winning games, I'll never forget feeling sick when they won state and we knew we had to pick up 1 week later and go to Montana. And then they won in Montana and we knew we had less than 2 weeks to fly to Florida and we were out of money. And what's interesting is I know the whole team was in many ways in the same financial position, but it felt like a lot of shame and embarrassment as it felt for John and I. We were maybe in the worst position, but pretending like we were in a great position to be able to do it and to be able to say yes. And so I vividly remember calling a place that's kind of a paycheck place and extending a credit line we already had. And they did that and then getting a brand new Southwest credit card and maxing both of them immediately to pay for myself to be with our 10-year-old and then John to join us for just a couple days because we couldn't afford for him to have time off. And then by the grace of God, we had friends and family who were able to take the triplets for us because we couldn't afford to send our family of six to Florida for the 12-day baseball run that we had to be out there for the World Series, once in a lifetime massive achievement by our little Eugene, Oregon baseball team. And so much excitement and joy around it. And yet also so much incredible weight, missing work, the amount of money that it takes just to live out of a hotel for that many days and nights and, working with other families. And I remember, there was one family, they were the kindest family and so humble, but he was a pharmacist and I remember the lightness that they felt and their whole family being able to come and it just felt so good. We were the one family that couldn't bring all the siblings. And so I remember feeling so much embarrassment around that. We couldn't afford to travel with our whole family and put everybody on an airplane across the country. Those are small problems in comparison to medical expenses and divorce or, true crises. So I'm not by any means giving it some over dramatic response, but the truth is we've all been there. And maybe you haven't. And if you haven't, maybe you wane on motivation from time to time. But if you felt that, it's actually helped me a ton. It's helped me a ton. Remember some days when maybe I don't want to play the game at the highest level. Do you remember being broke? Do you remember having this stress? Do you remember feeling the overwhelm? And what I realized was that we don't talk enough about the peace of mind that money can create. Not the flashy version, not the ego version, not the I have to have a Louis Vuitton purse or leave for a 3-week trip to Paris. I'm talking about the quiet version, the everyday life that when you have a different financial security and peace of mind with money, it lets you actually exhale. I know for a fact that money doesn't solve every problem that we have in life, but I know it solves enough of them that life feels a whole lot lighter when you have an abundance of a tool that, especially in the United States, our country runs off of. It's what we were born into, if you will. And so what does that really look like? I will tell you, there have been moments that I have looked back and thought, gosh, maybe I did work too much. And then there's these other moments where you recognize needs from people. And I've spoke very candidly about my parents being self-employed, losing everything and never being able to rebuild a big enough retirement that they were ever financially secure. And I, very lucky for me, was able to create enough. It was one of my very first chips that I worked off of, was create enough that not only you're supporting and in an abundant space with your own family and your children, meaning John and I and the kids, but that you also created enough that you can gladly, with no resentment, with no scorekeeping, with nothing but generosity, take care of your mom and dad. That was a huge win. And I think about the stress that would have been on our family if we didn't actually have that, if I didn't have that tool in that moment. And that's not a me statement. It's saying I was the one who had no ceiling on what I could create financially, and having no ceiling allowed for a problem to be solved that was going to be there no matter what. But instantly being able to give a tool to it took away probably countless sleepless nights for my parents, countless amounts of guilt and stress for my sisters and myself, problems that would need to be solved, whether it was an extra prescription, the gap between when their Medicare would run out, the new roof they would need on their house, or the water heater that suddenly broke. I was able to help. And there were plenty of moments in our early marriage where I wasn't able to do any of that without, every time we had a tire problem, we were racking back up our bill at our local tire company, Les Schwab. And that's okay, but it's one more bill in the mail. I remember sitting down and writing bills on a Sunday and paying out beyond just everyday living expenses, 13, 14, 15 additional payments, and just the emotional stress that that would bring. I think about it all the time, and I think, money doesn't remove grief. Money doesn't prevent illness. Money doesn't stop hardship, but money can buy better care. Money can buy time. When we had our little granddaughter get in a horrific accident a little over a year ago, truly was in life-threatening care, and we had no clue what her recovery would look like. It was a traumatic brain injury, and we thought to ourselves, this could be a very, very, very long road. And I remember having such a piece of whatever it takes, I can afford. Whatever it takes. I can buy a therapist. We can pay for specialty care. We can fly to a different clinic. We are not restrained financially. It means it bought less panic, and it bought way more flexibility. When we wanted to stay focused solely on Olivia's care and her recovery, when I wanted her parents to stay focused solely on being there and present with her and not worrying about what if we're not making money and what about our mortgage, I could fill those gaps. And it's interesting because I don't think it's a martyr syndrome or a power play or something that, again, glorifying more or glorifying the margin, if you will. But the abundance of money gives you the ability to say no and say yes. It gives you the ability to wait. It gives you the ability to choose. It gives you ability to invest in your own growth and in the growth of those that you love. It gives you the ability to sleep better at night. At 47, almost 48, lifting weights, having a trainer, leading at a high level, it lands so much differently for me what that tool has done for me than how I felt when I was 27, 28, 29, 30, into my early 30s. I wasn't ever really chasing status, and I don't think a lot of us are, but we were chasing peace, right? Protecting peace and chasing choices, meaning having the power to choose. I think that for all of us, we have moments in our life that come up that you go, and I would challenge you to look around you. Look around you and be aware and observant of where that is a problem in somebody else's life. And you can feel it in them not having, whether it's psychological safety or financial safety, security, and you can feel it in their reactions and their emotions and their heaviness, if you will, and their stress, maybe in their mood swings, different things. I've watched countless times, whether it is in hospital and medical situations or it is in life popping up out of the blue with the dryer broke or the dishwasher leaked or there's this and this, and being able to say, we're okay, even in travel, what a difference it makes, right? I remember being in Florida and thinking nothing else can go wrong because we can't afford anything until we get all this debt paid off. And even in Florida, what if there was a missed flight and we had to get a hotel for the night? We were maxed on everything. What a difference it is now, the peace of mind of travel. Something goes wrong, you have the resource and the ability to fix it. So when you decided to go 100% commission, when you decided to take the ceiling off of living in a fixed income budget, which is what happens whenever you have a very specific amount of money, period, end of story. Yes, you can adjust to live within your means, but you can't create necessarily. You can create, but your means have to stay at a certain level, right? Which is very hard to do. And so what can it create on the other side when you have chosen to create that abundance? So I knew that money would never heal grief. It wouldn't fix insecurity. It can't build my character. It can't replace relationships. But I knew it could take away some unnecessary suffering in people and in myself. I knew it would reduce anxiety. Again, it would increase generosity. It would create opportunity. And here's what I would challenge you with: there is zero shame and no guilt in wanting all of that and more. It doesn't mean you are greedy. It doesn't mean that you are excessive. Financial abundance is not selfish, it's stabilizing, it's protective, and it's empowering. And in industries like ours that can fluctuate so wildly, building abundance is actually wisdom. It's not greed. So give yourself permission to grind for things that are important to you, but most importantly, grind for your own peace and your own choices, because having the freedom in those two areas gives you the best version of yourself that then can pour heavily into others and create examples that other people can look to and grow from. And you, I promise, will feel incredibly fulfilled, not from the money, but from the overall security and the choice and the peace. If this was helpful, I hope you share it. We'll see you on the next Wild.